This 4th generation Subaru Forester has some problems, and well, don't they all. In this video, we're going to cover the top 5 that we have found with this vehicle. Some of them you might expect. Some of them might be a little surprising, and there is one that I'm going to cover that is mainly a problem if you're a tech or a DIYer that likes to perform their own repairs. So stay tuned for that one, because if you've experienced it, well, you already know. And if you haven't, you should probably know what to expect. A lot of the parts that we're covering in this video are actually available at oneauto.com, so check us out. That way you can get all the parts you need, do the job yourself, and save a lot of money. Let's address the expected and the obvious, and that's head gaskets. Yeah, this is not from this car. This is from a V8 truck, to be more specific. However, these head gaskets on these engines do tend to fail. There are 2 different engines offered with this, and one is more prone than the other, but both are prone to failure. It comes down to cooling components that fail eventually, and you want to pay attention to the overall condition of your coolant. You want to pay attention to your thermostat, the water pump, anything that has to do with the cooling system. The radiator is a big one, for example. If they are damaged or are giving signs of failure, do not ignore them. Replace them, address that issue as soon as possible, because the next step is going to be a blown head gasket. You don't want to go through the big job of tearing the engine apart to put head gaskets on if you can avoid it. And these aren't as bad as the older models, so if you take care of it, it'll take care of you. You just have to pay attention. Our second problem has to do with the catalytic converter. A lot of times these do fail on these Subarus, unfortunately. And there's a check engine light that goes with it. Usually it's a P0420 code telling you that the catalyst is below the threshold of efficiency. And what that means in simple terms is it just can't do the job anymore. Now, when you replace the catalytic converter, because that's the only way to fix this, you also have to find out why it failed. Because if you have very little miles on the vehicle, it didn't fail because of age or mileage. If you had 500,000–600,000 miles on the vehicle, that's understandable. But when it fails early, that's usually due to contaminants in the exhaust system that shouldn't be there. Whether that's excessive oil consumption, excessive fuel burning if it's running rich, or in worst cases coolant if you're starting to have a blown head gasket, which, as we talked about earlier, is common on these. When you have that happen, it will damage the catalytic converter prematurely, so check all of those things and make sure you fix them before you put that new catalytic converter on so you don't damage your new part as well. Our third problem has to do with the previous one that we just talked about, but it's not the same part, of course. We're talking about oxygen sensors in this one, and just like the catalytic converter, they can fail in 2 different ways. One is the heater circuit inside of them. They have a little resistor that warms them up when the engine is cold so that they can quickly read properly. Another way they can fail is if they get clogged up with carbon, debris, and anything that is burning in the engine that shouldn't be there. Just like previously said, excessive fuel, oil, coolant, anything like that should not be burnt and pass through the exhaust. Regardless of how the O2 sensor fails, you not only have to find out why it failed, but replace it so it can function properly, because a failed upstream O2 sensor does affect how the engine runs, and you want it to run nice and smooth and efficiently. We do sell these at oneauto.com, so if you need one, check us out. Our 4th and final engine-related problem is oil consumption. This can lead to a lot of bad things in the engine because not only does it have timing chains, which depend on lubrication to function properly. If they're not lubricated, they stretch, they wear out. The guides that are plastic, which guide the chain, end up chewing themselves to death basically because there's no oil in between the chain and the plastic guide. And this also has variable valve timing solenoids which run on oil pressure. So now if you don't have enough oil, you lose oil pressure, and then the engine can't even run properly, so it just creates a lot of havoc. But you want to make sure you keep that oil topped off, which should keep the engine nice and healthy. Unfortunately, oil consumption is just part of what these engines do, so you don't want to extend those oil change intervals. Keep them on the shorter side, keep the engine oil topped off, and that should keep your engine healthy. Our 5th problem, and this is most likely the one you've all been waiting for, is the lower ball joint pinch bolt. And if you know, you know. These never want to come out the nice way. If they do, it's gonna be a fight. If they don't, it's probably just gonna snap in the knuckle, and then you're in for another fight, and that's to drill it out and save the knuckle. So when you do a lower ball joint, and by the way, this one really needs it because the boot's all torn up, as you can see right here, you're going to want to be prepared for the worst is what I'm saying. So get a ball joint, of course, and whatever other parts you need that you're installing, but keep in mind that you're probably going to need a new bolt, and sometimes you will need a new knuckle, and that's just what it comes down to, especially if the vehicle is a salt belt vehicle like this one where it's pretty rusty. Also, these cars are great off-road, so if you go off-road often, but you get into a little oopsie where maybe you bend a control arm, tie rod, or break a ball joint, or whatever the case might be, that means there was a lot of pressure being put on that knuckle. And we do sell knuckles at oneauto.com, so when you go to fix your front end, whether it's just a ball joint or you're redoing it because you want to go back off-road and have some fun, make sure you check us out and look at the kits, because the kits will solve your issues all in one.